All right, so we all know that we find ourselves in a very interesting and precarious place in history. Just looking at the top global risks, from an IMSA perspective, you've got, by category, for societal risks, you've got obviously infectious diseases. That's kind of one of the top risks in the global pandemic that we're going through. From an economic point of view, there's a lot of economic uncertainty. From a technological perspective, we have, the cybersecurity risk that I see that some of the speakers have touched on earlier. And then from a geopolitical risk, we've got obviously terrorist attacks and kind of war looming in the spaces that we operate in. And then the big environmental category is obviously climate change. And then, other risks in terms of business interruption and obviously the cyber incidents are really impacting how businesses operate on a daily basis. So just beyond the current health pandemic and economic uncertainty, these catastrophic events linked to climate change, cyber attacks, war are expected to occur more frequently. And just some examples of that is obviously looking at climate change. We have the fires in California. From a cyber attack perspective, Transnet, more of looking at our local environment, Transnet and our national treasury have been hacked quite recently. From looking at a terrorist or war perspective, looking at the US military leaving $80 billion worth of military equipment in a terrorist for a terrorist organization when they left that behind in Afghanistan, is just some of the kind of risks and uncertainty that we have to deal with as organizations. Climate change alone presents a massive structural shift to organizations. Organizations need to balance concerns for the immediate bottom lines along with pressures from governments, investors, and societies at large. Additionally, organizations need to find the balance with complying to regulations, acting lawfully, and while taking a stand on social issues. Hashtag uncertainty is real rings true. All right, so taking all the uncertainty in consideration, in organizations, decisions still need to be made. The big question is, how can board directors and senior management be certain that they are making and approving the best possible decisions in the immediate and long term? Another question is, how do boards and senior management know that they are taking relevant risks into consideration when making these decisions? And the key word there is relevant risks. So it's, when you look at any decision-making criteria, risk is inherent, but from a business decision-making process, how do we know that the relevant risks have been considered when we make these decisions? Another question to ask is, how are organizations going to refresh and strengthen their approach to risk management and incorporate that into the decision-making strategy setting initiatives? And these are the questions that management and boards are increasingly grappling with regarding how risk affects strategy and vice versa, and are challenged by how to best approach risk management in a meaningful and productive way. And so even if you're in an organization that don't have a board, your senior management still need to answer those questions. So I've got a bit of two poll questions that we put together. So the first question was, does your organization actively link risks to business objectives? And again, it's the actively linking to risks that we were interested in. So it would have been interested to see kind of what the answers would have been. So the answers that we provided were all of your objectives, some of your objectives, and no objectives. So it just would have been interesting to see what the results were going to be. And the question that I wanted to just get an idea from the audience from was, does your organization take relevant risks into consideration when making strategic decisions? And the answers would have been, for every risk, we take risks into consideration. For some big decisions, we take risks into consideration, or none. So that would have been quite interesting to see what the results were. But in any event, The results aside, we still need to develop approach. So if the results were leaning that we all most organizations do link their risk to objectives, and most organizations do take risks into consideration when making strategic decisions, it would have been interesting to see what approach that these organizations. So moving on to the next slide is we need to develop an approach in order to make strategic decisions taking risk into consideration. Okay, so for strategic decisions to support high-level objectives, risk practitioners need to develop an approach for decision-making at a senior management level and assist the board, if you do have a board, or just your team in understanding the impact of those risks on strategic initiatives. So how do we do that? And I think that's one of the quick to answer in this presentation. The first area that we need to look at is to ensure that the organization is heading in the right direction by aligning the organizational objectives to its new external context, especially in the uncertain times that we find ourselves in. The second area is to determine the factors that can affect those organizational ability objectives. The third area is to develop or update your strategic plans that align with the adjusted objectives while taking those factors that affect these objectives into consideration. And the fourth area is to consider the use of technology and information management and how that incorporates and supports the approach of strategy, whereby we can integrate and provide one source of the. So we've coined the term "Use Your Heart," and what we mean by that is, well, the first area, as mentioned, is heading in the right direction, and we'll break this out a bit further on. The second area, assess your threats and opportunities. The third area, go and realize and revise your strategic plans. And the fourth area, last area, take technology into consideration. Okay, so heading in the right direction. It seems like such a simple and easy thing to do. So again, as board directors and senior management, what are some of the more important questions that you and we should be asking about or thinking about to ensure that the organization is heading in the right direction? The first and most obvious question is, are we still in the right direction? So remember, our external changed with the pandemic and kind of everything that's happening in the background. We definitely need to ask that question, because sometimes we have these strategic objectives in place, but they might not be relevant anymore, or they have to change. Another question to ask ourselves is, are the current high levels still relevant in times? Do we have the right metrics and performance targets in place to measure our objectives, taking the new normal into consideration? And things like risk and our risk tolerances, have we reconsidered those for the objective level and the risks that are linked to those objectives? Have we considered the new external and index when setting or adjusting our objectives and our strategies? And subsequently, we need to revise these current objectives and establish new objectives if needed. If we don't know where we're going, you'll end up nowhere at the same time. So really important to really go back to the drawing board and ensure that you as an organization are heading in the right direction. Okay, so now the board of directors and senior management have confirmed that the organization is still heading in the right direction. The next step is to assess our threats and opportunities that impact those current and new objectives, because your objectives might have changed. Even if the objectives have not changed, the external context certainly has changed, and your threats and opportunities have to have changed. So maybe the threat is still the same, but the assessment of the threat has changed, and the mitigation and controls that you put in place definitely have changed. And also, this is also, it gives you an opportunity to look at the opportunities that are linked to the objective that you've set or that has changed. So there are many factors that can impact an organization's ability to achieve the established objectives. It is essential to establish an integrated management of risk and compliance to ensure aligned with the stated objectives. Again, very important that we link threats and opportunities to objectives. And I find a lot of organizations that are part of that sometimes threats and opportunities live separate and they're in silo. They're not part of the strategic business. Additionally, management need to evaluate existing capabilities. And what I mean by that is it's your people, processes, technology, information, and how they affect the ability to achieve those objectives while addressing uncertainty and acting with integrity. All right, so the organization's heading in the right direction. Threats and opportunities have been assessed. The next step is now to determine if our current strategic plans need to change. And need to be developed, taking those adjusted objectives, adjusted threats, adjusted opportunities into consideration. Again, bearing in mind that objectives come before strategy. So a lot of the times people put strategy ahead of your strategic objectives, and it's kind of like the tail wagging the dog. So your strategies are the how to achieve the objectives for the organization. And your objectives for the organization need to link to your purpose and mission and vision statement. And so once you have that structure in place, and depending on the industry and business that you're in, your objectives are in place, and then you look at your strategies and how the strategies are going to help you achieve the objectives. All right, so subsequently to considering our strategic plans, subsequently we need to now ensure that our strategic plans are in line with the objectives, with the threats and the opportunities that we have assessed. And now we're integrating management of risk and compliance within the mainline operations and to enhance ownership and accountability throughout the organization. Okay, so objectives have been set, threats and opportunities have been assessed, have been revised or created, so everything is in line. The next step is to ensure that all these areas are integrated by providing a central repository for all relevant information and reporting capabilities using technology. And again, I've seen this in many organizations. They do maybe the first 3 steps well, but then from a technology perspective, silos. So how do you area is impacted or what has a dependency on another area? Having a consistent and reliable information, metrics, triggers for established management of action and controls is critical, and in the risk-informed strategy setting process. So very important technology to make sure that all these areas are integrated and linked. Okay, so practical application. So how can we apply this HART process, HART approach to strategic decision making while taking risk into consideration? So one example could be a mind map, as simple as a mind map. So looking at this mind map, you'll see that I've made a bit of an example just to kind of draw out the practical approach. Here, an example of growing international footprint. That is our strategic objective. We've ensured that we are heading in the right direction. We've assessed that from a board and senior management perspective, and so we're comfortable with that objective. And now the next thing that we need to do is assess our threats and opportunities and see how those threats and opportunities are linked to our strategic objective. So you've got opportunities that links to our strategic objective. One threat could be operational inefficiency. Another threat could be political uncertainty. We're trying to expand into other countries. So looking at the country we're looking to go into, there might be uncertainty in that country. and operational inefficiency from the point of view that we don't have any local resources in that country and we now need to go do a recruitment drive. So operationally, there might be some inefficiencies that we needed to consider. But we also have to look at some of the opportunities that we have. One of the opportunities could be its entry into new markets, and the other opportunity could be increased business growth. Okay, so now we've got our strategic objective, we've got our threats, we've assessed those, and now we need to ensure that our strategic plans speak to our strategic objective. So our strategic plan, in terms of moving or growing our international footprint, will be establish in-country partnerships, and another strategic plan could be create local within that country. But now that we can see the information and how all these areas are linked, we can see, okay, but maybe it's not such a great idea to create a local business unit because of the political uncertainty. So that might become an obsolete strategic plan, and we can just look at establishing in-country partnership until a point where the political uncertainty is acceptable, and then we can look at opening up an office in that country. So using a mind map could be a very nice application of the HART model. So moving into the next slide, now you can see kind of how that fits together. So looking at the HART approach, so we've ensured that we are heading in the right direction. We're happy with our strategic objective. Moving to the A, we've assessed our threats and opportunities, and we've ensured that we've looked at that and put mitigations and controls in place and allocate responsibilities for those elements. And now we can look at realizing and revising our strategic plans now that we see all the information and how it's all linked. And obviously, technology was used to kind of create this linking between all these objects. Okay. Another example from a practical application perspective could be using a BowTie. And so if you're not familiar with BowTie, you've obviously have your strategic objective and your risk event in the middle. I've also linked my strategic plan just for the example, and then typically you'll have your causes for that risk event on the left-hand side and your consequences on the right-hand side. So I'd just like to kind of speak through the example. So again, I've used the same example of growing our international footprint, and we're making sure that we it's still one of the objectives that we want to achieve. We're heading in the right direction. We're happy with that. I've just taken one of the threats, political uncertainty, just to play out the example. Okay, so for political uncertainty, we might have two causes that cause that threat or risk to materialize. Could be demographic changes. The other could be disruptive innovation in technology. Okay, and so then we look at the right-hand side and seeing kind of what are the consequences or impacts of that risk materializing. So we could have something like to the likes of economic uncertainty, which links to demographic changes. So demographic caused that risk event to materialize, and the impact is economic uncertainty, similar to disruptive and innovation technology being a cause for that on the left-hand side, and the impact could be cyber dependency of that. And as you can see, you actually can go and rate these causes and do your normal risk assessment and rate your kind of impact, so how that would impact your organization and how it impacts the actual objective. And then you can see kind of the strategic plan that we have. Example from the previous mind map. So creating a local office maybe is obsolete, so we're still happy with establishing in-country partnerships with that objective of growing internationally. And then, as you can see, the controls in place. So we have preventative controls for each of the causes. I don't want to get too technical. And then we have obviously our controls in place for the likelihood on the right-hand side. And so then you can have kind of abundant information in terms of making the decision and ensuring that the strategic plan that you have in place is still valid and is something that we would be implementing as a business or an organization. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next slide, and so you're going to see again how the HART model was applied using the BowTie. Okay, so very simple. We've ensured that we are heading in the right direction with our objective. We're going to go and assess our threats. For example, I just used one threat, threats and opportunities, and you can see all the breakout of that threat in terms of causes, consequences, and then all the controls linked to those. And now we can go and realize and revise our strategy, looking at all the information. So this gives you a lot of linking, and you can see kind of, all the in one screen, and that would inform you that your strategic plan needs to change or it needs to be updated. All right, so moving on to the last example of how we can practically apply the HART model in strategic decision making while taking risk into consideration. You could use something like an objective dashboard, whereby you've got all your objectives. Yeah, you've got all your objectives in the organization or for one area in your organization. You drill down on again footprint. It can then show you kind of which threats and opportunities are linked to that objective. You then go and as per the HART model, you go and assess your threats and opportunities, and you can see kind of the impact and the ratings of those threats and opportunities and what it has on that objective. And then we can go and realize and revise our strategic plans as per the HART model. And again, technology kind of brings us all together in different views and in different ways, and to show us kind of how we can make our decisions looking at all the information that's been integrated. Good, and then just again, looking at how the HART model gets applied here. Again, we're sure that we're heading in the right direction with our strategic objectives. We've assessed our threats and opportunities on the top right and bottom left. We've taken all this information into consideration. We've realized and revised our strategic plans, and we've taken technology into consideration with this model. Okay, so in circling back to answering the original question, how can board directors and senior management be certain that they're making and approving the best possible decisions and strategic plans for the immediate and long term? By having a HART.